At midnight in a quiet Tucson suburb, the front and rear doors of 78-year-old Nancy Guthrie's home were unlatched at the exact same second. It was a perfectly synchronized breach that cut off any possible avenue of escape, yet when the predator finally initiated contact, they didn't ask her family for a single dollar. The question is why a criminal network would execute a flawless, high-stakes abduction only to completely abandon their financial ransom plan within 48 hours. What actually happened in that desert during those first few hours, and how did a family survive carrying the horrific secret of these letters in absolute silence for months before the public record leaked? The answer lies inside the secret digital footprints of a secure server that investigative reporter Brian Entin began tracing after a massive media leak. Tonight, we expose the twisted linguistics of the second transmission, step behind the title cards of Casebreak Network, and reveal the exact 4 words that forced an FBI behavioral profiler to realize what everyone else missed. This is Casebreak Network, breaking cases following every lead. Within 48 hours of Nancy Guthrie's sudden disappearance from her home, a quiet digital signature landed inside a local Tucson newsroom. It did not use a traceable routing line. Instead, it came from an engineered, secure server designed to erase its own technical footprints before the message could even be read. But it left a trail anyway. At that exact hour, according to localized newsroom logs, an editor was casually updating the morning broadcast calendar, while a completely anonymous, encrypted window was unpacking a multi-million-dollar Bitcoin extortion script onto their terminal. The intruder left several physical markers at the property. Elena Torres, who lived next door to Nancy's property for over 12 years, later stated that Nancy was an exceptionally meticulous woman who never left her back patio gate unlatched, checking the lock precisely twice every dusk. Yet investigators found that gate swinging wide open in the wind. On the front stone steps right outside Nancy's front door, technicians discovered multiple wet drops of blood. Forensic testing later confirmed that the blood belonged exclusively to her. A hidden, residential security setup managed to capture one fleeting glimpse of the threat. An armed, masked individual carrying a heavily packed 25-liter Ozark Trail backpack moved past the windows, actively tampering with the external lens interface. The cold, blue light of a forensic monitor cast long, razor-thin shadows across the heavy metal investigative desks inside the tactical field office. At that exact moment, Nancy's bedside pacemaker monitor completely dropped its cellular connection loop, failing its scheduled automated transmission at exactly 2:28 a.m. The initial message sent to the media proved the sender had intimate access to the interior space. The note listed the exact placement of her bedroom furniture, highlighting a white-banded Apple Watch abandoned near the mattress. Then, a secondary encrypted digital text file delivered days later completely withdrew the massive financial demand. The new layout explicitly stated that Nancy was already dead, replacing the payment protocol with 4 highly unusual words. What is strange about this is how quickly the financial motive evaporated. Most extortion loops break under intense pressure, but here, the sender completely shifted the narrative focus into something lyrical. Nobody covered this clearly enough, so let us slow down here. The text explicitly stated that Nancy was buried with nature. Now, Ray Carr, a retired FBI profiler and behavioral analyst, examined the vocabulary layer under a forensic lens. He noted that the phrase buried in nature is kind of abstract to me, almost as though it's poetic. Someone is attempting to emotionally distance themselves from what's going on. The suspect completely failed to transmit a single verifiable proof-of-life photograph or physical confirmation of safety, despite explicit private counterdemands established by federal negotiators. The cold desert sand leaves no shadow when the midnight wind shifts. The encryption keys weren't as flawless as the sender believed. When federal data hubs ran the raw code from that second television transmission, they exposed a critical technical vulnerability that the creator never intended to leave behind. But that programming vulnerability is not even the most damaging asset in the file. There is a precise 3-second drop in that proxy network mask, one caught by a local utility database handshake that places a specific identity exactly where the signal went live. And once you trace the handshake, the anonymous wall collapses. The network records show the secure server lease used to send the alerts was purchased using a commercial credit card layer exactly 4 hours before Nancy's home was breached. The Internet Protocol connection data reveals that the initial layout commands were sent through a localized residential proxy routing node less than 3 miles from Nancy's front door. The heavy, thick scent of rain-soaked desert dust rolled off the gravel flats, creeping silently through the automated ventilation vents of the regional data facility. The second transmission withdrew the Bitcoin demand entirely, shifting focus to absolute privacy. The individual setup used a high-level commercial shield to mask the commands, masking the origin behind an international server array. The system appeared entirely seamless to the initial data analysts. Yet during the technical tracking sequence, federal cyber units confirmed that the individual utilized identical pre-rendered script text formats across separate media platforms to ensure the timing of the news broadcast could be tracked. The network registration logs revealed that the secure server configuration was accessed and tested using a physical device running a rare, custom administrative utility software setup. Then came the technical break. At exactly 2:14 a.m., right between the first and second transmission waves, the system logged a sharp, unmasked 3-second drop in the proxy server's commercial routing shield. That specific 3-second gap completely unmasked an encrypted regional routing link tied directly to a local, closed-circuit industrial data box managing the community's critical utility grid lines. The database archives confirmed that an identical infrastructure verification handshake was manually executed during both separate media note transmissions, proving the sender was sitting directly inside that regional system loop. That detail should not matter, but it does. Because Nancy Guthrie was a woman who kept her life entirely offline, completely disconnected from the digital world. Yet while she was checking her back patio gate, an individual was leasing high-level commercial server layers to plan her absolute erasure. This is where it gets complicated. The individual running the encryption scripts realized the network link was exposed, yet they consciously chose to stay online to finish the media broadcast. We need to look closely at the total lack of panic behind this decision. A clean system log makes no sound when the tracking grid closes. There are 2 ways to look at the sender's decision to completely withdraw the financial Bitcoin demand during that second transmission. Either they realized the federal tracking was actively closing in on their local routing node, or the physical operation inside the desert spiraled into total, unmanageable chaos within the first 48 hours. Look closely at that sudden shift in the script text. You need to tell me your perspective on this behavior. Let me know in the comments. Do you see a cold, calculated strategic retreat, or do you see absolute panic? To the local data investigators, the technical file was effectively complete. The commercial proxy logs were mapped, the server lease lines were fully traced, and on paper, the mystery of the secure server transmissions was solved. Except for one missing industrial handshake. The digital trail had officially run into a dead end inside the coding matrix. But just as the task force prepared to suspend the tracking array, a local patrol officer stepped forward with a physical log sheet from that exact residential street corner. But that physical patrol log is not even the most damaging discovery in the file. There is a single physical asset noted on that street corner, one caught on standard traffic safety film, that places a specific commercial vehicle exactly where the network dropped, and once you see the headlights flash, the entire digital defense shatters. Before the data locks the forensic trap, we must look back at who actually lived inside that house. Nancy Guthrie was a grandmother who spent her quiet Tuesday mornings planting bright yellow desert marigolds along her back patio gravel walkway. She built her life around the predictable, gentle rhythm of her garden, entirely unaware that her ordinary movements were being timed by an outsider. The public record reveals a quiet worker who spent years fixing local utility lines after dark. But beneath that ordinary routine sat a crumbling financial reality that was about to collide with Nancy Guthrie's home. Local traffic security cameras and entry gate logs confirmed a commercial utility service van entered the restricted infrastructure facility zone at exactly 2:10 a.m. The suspect's unique employee identification badge was swiped at the primary security gate less than 60 seconds before the server transmission went live. The blinding white beam of a high-intensity halogen flashlight cut straight through the dark cabin of the impounded utility vehicle. The mobile data terminal mounted inside that specific utility vehicle was actively running an encrypted network session at 2:14 a.m. The utility service truck was logged at the restricted regional data facility during the exact 3-second proxy drop. Inside the empty kitchen on Elm Street, those faded comic strips still hang on Nancy's refrigerator door, a silent testament to a normal life that was interrupted in a single night. The suspect attempted to reframe the narrative by stating the death was completely accidental. Ray Carr, a retired FBI profiler and behavioral analyst, clarified the deception strategy, stating that deceptive communication usually minimizes what he's doing. They're reducing perceived intent of what everything is about. Why he would actually tell them is he's trying to psychologically distance from this. If you want to ensure Nancy's story isn't buried like the physical evidence was, hit subscribe to Casebreak Network, because following every lead means we refuse to look away when the truth begins to surface. The forensic loop was technically closed, but the suspect remained completely silent behind their legal guardrails. It took a sudden, desperate broadcast from inside a national television studio to break the case wide open. The heavy morning fog rolled slowly across the cold concrete plazas outside the Rockefeller Center broadcasting studio. A quiet room tells no lies when the transmission ends. Savannah Guthrie sat at the anchor desk of the Today Show, her professional posture held tight against the blinding studio lights before she looked straight into the camera lens to face the silent desert. She explained she was not part of the network's forensic coverage, yet she refused to pretend her mother's empty chair did not exist. She openly begged anyone with a shred of local information to step forward. "We are in agony," she stated, her voice fracturing body over the direct glare of national television. "We cannot be at peace. If the forensic utility records represent a terrible, catastrophic series of data coincidences, then an innocent person is currently trapped inside a nightmare they cannot escape." The decision Nancy Guthrie made, the one that cost her everything inside the Arizona desert basin, may be the thing that finally brings justice for Nancy Guthrie. Because her travel records and localized ticket purchases are being audited alongside the suspect's electronic grid schedules to map out the final coordination of the trap. Nancy stands at the terminal counter with her luggage packed tight, laughing as she checks her purse for her paper boarding pass. She looks up at the digital departures monitor, watching her flight number flash green as the boarding process begins. In less than 6 hours, she will step out into the bustling terminal and see her daughters waiting for her under the city lights. Then the back patio gate clicked shut. The final investigative filing explicitly names Nancy Guthrie and the primary tracking suspect inside the Tucson utility vehicle log. If you want to support this ongoing search, take 1 second to subscribe to Casebreak Network, where we stay with the evidence because breaking cases means following every lead. At midnight in a quiet Tucson suburb, the front and rear doors were unlatched at the exact same second, but the digital echo they left behind will never let us forget who was taken from the dark.